OCO, sons and daughters, before this story truly takes hold, find a place in the comments, tell me where you hail from. Let the world know where these words are finding root. It matters more than you might think right now. They taught us plenty in Ranger School, mind you. How to set a splint on a fractured bone miles from any road. How to read the sky for weather, predict the temper of a coming storm just by the way the clouds curdled over the peaks. They showed us how to navigate by star and sun, how to track a man or beast across unforgiving ground. Hypothermia, heat stroke, snakebite, poison ivy rashes thick as hides. We learned the remedies, the preventative measures. They drilled us on how to spot the subtle signs of illegal snares, the glint of wire nearly invisible against the leaf litter, the disturbed earth around a foothold trap meant for coyote, but just as likely to snap shut on a hiker's ankle. They even walked us through the grim necessity of putting down a rabid animal, swiftly, cleanly, minimizing suffering, but steeling your heart against the act. We learned fire management, erosion control, how to speak with frightened tourists and how to enforce the park regulations with a firm but fair hand. But there wasn't a single page, not one paragraph in any field manual that covered the specific dread that clamps onto your soul when the ancient hemlocks start whispering your name. Not just any name, mind you. Your name spoken in a voice you haven't heard since your older brother, taken too young by the fever, last drew breath. There's no training module for the visceral, ice-cold certainty that washes over you when you find claw marks gouged deep into the pale bark of a birch tree 12 feet above the ground. Claw marks that speak of impossible strength, of a reach far beyond any known creature dwelling in these hills. Nothing prepares you for the sight of a black bear carcass, a 200-pound male in its prime, discovered not just killed, but desecrated. Its rib cage wasn't crushed or broken, it was peeled open, methodically, almost surgically, spread, wide like the petals of some grotesque bloody flower, its organs meticulously removed or scattered. Nothing, absolutely nothing in the civilized world they tried to shape us for, prepares you for them. The things that move in the shadowed places, the things the mountains keep hidden until they choose not to. I am Eastern Band Cherokee, born and raised right here, just a stone's throw from the Qualla boundary, the land that holds the heart of my people. My childhood was steeped in the rhythms of these mountains, the smell of wood smoke and damp earth, the taste of wild berries and trout pulled fresh from the Oconaluftee River. Took this post with the National Park Service, felt like a calling, more than a job. Thought I'd spend my days walking trails my ancestors walked, breathing air thick with pine and history, protecting this sacred ground, ensuring it remained a place of refuge and wildness. And for a time it was just that. A deep, abiding peace settled over me when I pulled on the uniform, pinned the badge, the great smoky mountains. They felt like kin. They held me, sheltered me. In the mornings, the mist clinging to the valleys felt like a blessing. The wind singing through the high branches of the tulip poplars and the dense thickets of mountain laurel wasn't just wind. It felt like the mountain breathing, humming ancient songs. The rivers, clear and cold, rushing over smooth stones, seemed to whisper old secrets, stories told in the Cherokee tongue, tales of Uktena and the Thunderers, truths held in the water's flow. It was a good life, a right life. But something shifted. About a year back, maybe a little more, hard to pinpoint the exact day the melody went sour when the harmony fractured. The change wasn't sudden, not like a lightning strike, more like a slow fever creeping into the forest's veins. The woods grew meaner. That's the only word that fits. Not hostile, not exactly, but watchful in a way that prickled the skin, raised the hairs on your neck. The shadows seemed deeper, colder. The familiar bird calls started thinning out in certain areas, replaced by an unsettling quiet. And then, people started disappearing. Not just the usual lost hiker found shivering, but safe after a night out. These were different, vanished, utterly. A couple of experienced campers near Abrams Creek, their tent found zipped shut, sleeping bags still inside, food neatly stored, but no sign of them. A seasoned hiker on the Appalachian Trail section, last seen cheerful and well-equipped, gone. And then one of our own, Jim Weir, just a kid really. Quiet, diligent, always had his nose in a field guide. Went out to check a remote weather station up near Clingman's Dome and just never came back. We searched for weeks, combed every inch of terrain, found his day pack neatly placed beside a stream, water bottle still half full, but Jim evaporated, like the mountain had just swallowed him whole. Officially, the report cited disorientation, accidents, possible animal encounters, though no remains were ever found to support that. Plausible deniability, easier explanations for minds unwilling to confront the deeper, colder possibilities. But down in our guts, those of us who knew these woods, who felt their pulse, we knew better. We felt the wrongness coiling beneath the surface. We just didn't have a name for it yet. It was a bitter October morning, the air sharp enough to bite, frost glittering on the dying leaves, when I found the first undeniable sign. I was heading up to check the trail cameras we'd positioned, near an old forbidding ridge locally known as Horned Devil's Hollow. The name itself should have been warning enough. It wasn't on any official park map, just a name passed down, clinging to that place like the damp moss on its rocks. An old family name, really, surfacing from the depths of my grandfather's stories. I can still see him clear as day, sitting by the crackling fire, his face a road map of wrinkles etched by sun and time, eyes distant as he spun tales between sips of fiery corn whiskey. He'd talk about that hollow, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, telling of a creature that haunted the place. A beast with eyes like burning coals, unnaturally long limbs, and cloven hooves that struck sparks from the stone. A thing of shadow and ill omen. I'd mostly laughed it off back then, dismissed it as campfire spook tales fueled by drink or a desire to tease his wide-eyed grandson. Just stories, legends, folklore. But standing there in the crisp morning air, the hollow brooding below me, a silence deeper than mere quiet settling over the ridge, those stories felt suddenly less amusing. I located the camera mounted high on a sturdy oak, unlocked the casing and carefully pulled the memory card. Crouching down, shielded from the wind, I slotted the card into the field tablet. My fingers felt clumsy with cold, or maybe something else. The first few clips showed nothing unusual. A curious doe sniffing the lens, a fat raccoon bustling past, in the night. A black bear ambling through, indifferent. Then, time-stamped just before dawn 3 days prior, the footage flickered. The image wasn't clear, distorted by low light and distance, but it was enough. My breath caught in my throat, the tablet nearly slipping from my grasp. A silhouette, tall, unnervingly so, hunched over, as if burdened by some invisible weight or malformed spine. Far too thin, too gaunt to be a bear. Its limbs seemed impossibly long, spindly, and somehow backward, jointed wrong, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait that defied normal anatomy. It paused, turning slowly towards the camera, and though the details were lost in shadow, 2 points of light flared in the darkness where eyes should be. Hot, incandescent red, like embers fanned by a malevolent bellows. They seemed to burn through the gloom, fixing directly on the lens. Not just looking, but seeing, knowing. A primal predatory intelligence radiating from those impossible eyes. My stomach clenched into a tight, cold knot. My grandfather's whispered warnings came flooding back, no longer sounding like drunken ramblings. It wasn't just the creature itself, terrifying as it was. It was the effect it had on the recording. Static, like angry bees, danced across the image whenever the figure moved. The edges of the frame seemed to fuzz and distort, as if the very air, the fabric of the forest itself, recoiled from its presence, unable to properly contain or capture its wrongness. I watched the clip again, and again, each viewing chilling, me deeper. I saved the file, my hand trembling slightly as I replaced the memory card and secured the camera. I didn't report it right away. Didn't tell a soul. You don't climb the ladder in the Park Service, especially as a native man often viewed with a certain subtle suspicion, by spreading ghost stories or talking about things that crawl out of legends. You stick to the facts, the observable, the explainable. You file reports about erosion and bear sightings, not about creatures with backward limbs and eyes like hellfire caught on digital film. But the forest knew, and it wasn't keeping quiet anymore. The signs started escalating, the claw marks, not just the impossibly high ones on trees. They started appearing lower down, scratches gouged into the metal doors of ranger patrol trucks parked overnight near. Trailheads leading towards the hollow. Deep furrows raked across the thick timbers of remote footbridges. One morning, climbing the winding path to the fire lookout tower perched on Mount Sterling, I found them etched into the heavy steel door at the base. 3 parallel scores, sunk deep into the metal, peeling back layers of paint and exposing the raw steel beneath. Whatever this thing was, it was marking its territory, boldly, aggressively. And the boundaries of that territory seemed to be expanding, pushing outward from Horned Devil's Hollow, encompassing more and more of the park. Our trails, our stations. We were smack in the middle of its domain. The worst part, the thing that gnawed at me most deeply beyond the physical evidence, was the silence. Specifically, the unnatural stillness that descended upon the areas where these signs appeared. You'd hike into a section of woods that should be alive with the chatter of squirrels, the calls of chickadees and thrushes, the drone of insects, the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. But instead, you'd walk into absolute silence, a heavy, oppressive vacuum where even the wind seemed afraid to blow. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. The air felt thick, dead, like the entire forest was collectively holding its breath, waiting for something dreadful to pass. It was a silence that screamed louder than any shriek. About a week after finding the scratches on the lookout tower, battling my own disbelief and growing dread, I had to take a trainee out. Josie Twinerita. Sharp, kid, eager, full of that bright-eyed textbook optimism they drill into you early on, still saw the woods as a place of beauty and challenge, not yet as a place that could harbor profound darkness. We were tasked with surveying potential trail reroutes near the southern edge of the hollow. As we hiked up, the air growing noticeably colder and quieter the closer we got, she was trying to lighten the mood, making jokes about Bigfoot and Sasquatch sightings. She sensed my tension, my grim quiet. "You really believe there's something out here you're not telling me, Ranger Crow?" she asked, a small, slightly nervous smirk playing on her lips. Trying to needle me, maybe, or just genuinely curious about my reserved demeanor. I didn't answer her directly. Didn't need to. She must have seen something in my eyes, a reflection of the unease that had become my constant companion. Maybe it was the way I kept scanning the tree line, the way my hand rested perhaps too close to the sidearm holstered on my hip. Her jokes tapered off. The silence stretched, punctuated only by our footsteps on the path and our own breathing. Then we found it. Tucked away in a small clearing, partially obscured by fallen leaves and tangled rhododendron, was a pile. Not just a random scattering, a deliberate arrangement. Bones, bleached white by weather, picked clean, arranged in a meticulous, almost perfect spiral on the damp earth. At first glance you might think animal remains, but Josie, despite her greenness, had sharp eyes. She knelt closer, her face paling rapidly. "Jesus Christ, Ranger," she whispered, her voice trembling. These aren't animal bones. They're human. The shape of a pelvic bone, unmistakably human. The curve of a femur. Smaller bones that look terribly like fingers, arranged with gruesome artistry. Her smile, her earlier joking manner vanished completely, replaced by stark horror. And right then, as the full implication of the discovery washed over us, the forest went utterly, completely silent again. That heavy, expectant hush fell like a shroud, holding its breath, watching. I know how this sounds. I hear the skepticism in your imagined voice, the rational mind searching for logical explanations. Bear predation, a deranged hermit, tourist campfire tales spun large, cryptid nonsense cooked up for internet clicks and late-night radio shows. Believe me, I've wrestled with those same thoughts, desperately wished for those simpler answers. But I need you to understand, this isn't a story I'm telling for entertainment. This is a warning, a testimony. I saw that thing on the trail camera. I saw the impossible marks. I stood over those deliberately arranged human bones in that silent, watchful clearing. Josie saw it too, felt it. Whatever resides in these mountains, whatever has awakened in Horned Devil's Hollow, it's real, tangible, malevolent, and if we don't figure out how to face it, how to stop it, soon, its hunger won't be contained within these woods. It'll spread, like a plague, like a darkness, bleeding out into the world. After Josie found the human bones, the horrifying spiral arrangement seared into our minds. Protocol dictated involving the local county authorities. Reluctantly, I made the call. I knew, deep down, it was likely too little, too late, and possibly the wrong kind of help altogether. The sheriff, a portly man named Davis whose jurisdiction technically ended at the park boundary, but who often assisted with major incidents, came out himself, bringing a handful of deputies. They were good men mostly, competent at dealing with traffic violations, domestic disputes, the occasional bar fight. But this was beyond their scope, beyond their imagination. They trampled through the clearing, their heavy boots disturbing the leaves, their voices loud and grating in the oppressive quiet. They secured the scene with yellow tape that looked absurdly bright against the muted tones of the forest floor. Their radios crackled with mundane chatter, dispatch calls about stray dogs and fender benders, creating a bizarre dissonance with the ancient horror we'd uncovered. Their powerful flashlights, even in the daylight filtering through the canopy, only seemed to make the surrounding shadows look thicker, deeper, more menacing. They didn't understand. Couldn't understand. They talked about a possible serial killer, maybe transients moving through. They speculated about a particularly large and aggressive rogue bear, maybe a mountain lion driven to unusual behavior by illness or starvation. Theories that sounded logical in a brightly lit office, but felt hollow and inadequate, standing there amidst the whispering trees and the chilling arrangement of human remains. Hell, a part of me, the part trained to seek rational explanations, almost wanted to believe them, wanted desperately for it to be just a bear, but the precision of the bone arrangement didn't fit any animal kill I'd ever seen or heard of. And neither did those deep, smoky claw marks I'd found later, scoring the hard granite rocks down by the creek that flowed out of the hollow, marks too high, too powerful for any known predator. Marks that looked disturbingly similar to the ones on the ranger trucks and the fire tower door. A week crawled by, thick with unspoken fear and bureaucratic procedure. Reports were filed. The bones were collected, sent off to the state lab for identification, a process likely to take months. The official investigation stalled, hampered by the lack of witnesses, the remoteness of the location, and the sheer, baffling nature of the evidence. Tourists were politely but firmly discouraged from hiking near Horned Devil's Hollow, citing ongoing investigation and potentially hazardous conditions. But the unease remained, a low thrum beneath the surface of park life. Then we got the second body, found by hikers straying off trail, closer to the main park road this time, as if the darkness was creeping outwards. This one wasn't like the pile of bones. This was recent, horrifyingly so, and it wasn't a kill suggesting predation or even simple murder. It was a carcass, stripped almost entirely bare, flesh meticulously removed, leaving only sinew clinging stubbornly to bone. It was arranged, posed almost, against the base of a massive ancient oak, and the rib cage, again with the rib cage, carved open with brutal precision, spread wide like the bear's had been, but this time it was clear that whatever lay within, heart, lungs, organs, had been ripped out, torn apart, searched through perhaps. Not consumed, but violated, destroyed with a purpose that felt terrifyingly ritualistic. I knew it the moment I saw it. This wasn't just a killing. This was a statement, a warning, a grotesque message delivered in blood and bone. But who was the message for? Us, the Park Service, the Cherokee people whose ancestors had known this land for millennia? And why now? What had changed? What had we disturbed? The local townsfolk, particularly the older Cherokee families living near the boundary, reacted as expected. Lips tightened. Gazes slid away when asked directly. Doors closed perhaps a little too quickly. They'd been tight-lipped about the stranger aspects of these mountains for generations, protecting their knowledge perhaps, or simply trying to live alongside forces they knew couldn't be controlled. But now, talking to some of the elders, I knew the ones who trusted me, I could feel a different kind of tension. Not just reluctance, but fear. A deep, ancestral fear. There was something ancient, primal, inextricably tied to these woods, to Horned Devil's Hollow specifically. The legends, the stories my grandfather told, they weren't just tales to spook children. They were history, oral traditions, holding kernels of terrifying truth. Something had indeed awakened, something slumbering perhaps for centuries, and it was older, far older than any map, any park boundary, any of us currently walking this earth. My suspicions solidified, hardening, from uneasy feelings into near certainty. But suspicions weren't evidence, not the kind that satisfied superiors or county sheriffs. All I had was my gut, twisting and gnawing at me like a feral dog trapped in my ribs, and the chilling images burned into my memory, the trail cam silhouette, the impossible claw marks, the spiral of bones, the desecrated carcass beneath the oak. I knew I couldn't handle this alone, and the official channels were proving useless. I needed someone who understood, someone who might grasp the deeper context. I called in a few trusted rangers from other districts, feeding them sanitized versions of the situation, focusing on the unexplained disappearances and unusual animal signs. Only one of them, Eli Stevens, truly registered the undertones, the things I wasn't saying explicitly. Eli was older than me, his face weathered like the mountain rock itself, carrying the quiet wisdom of years spent walking these ridges. He was Cherokee, too, born into the same traditions, though his family hailed from a different part of the reservation, closer to Snowbird. Eli wasn't assigned to the Smokies full-time, usually working further west. But he knew the deep history here. He'd heard the same stories I had growing up, maybe different versions, different names, but the essence was the same. He knew about the spirits of the mountains, the Nunnehi, the protectors, but also about the darker things, the creatures the elders spoke of only in hushed tones, warnings embedded in myths. He admitted when I pressed him that he'd heard whispers in his own ancestors' tales of something akin to a horned devil figure, associated with places of bad energy, places where the veil between worlds was thin. But like me, like most modern folks, he'd always dismissed it as superstition, allegory, folklore. He wasn't prepared for the possibility of it being chillingly, terrifyingly real. We sat in my Park Service truck one cold grey afternoon, parked at an overlook that offered a clear, albeit distant view of Horned Devil's Hollow. The mountain range loomed before us, a vast sleeping beast, hunched and brooding under a low, sky-threatening rain or maybe snow. Thick fog clung stubbornly to its lower slopes, obscuring the valleys, adding to the sense of mystery and foreboding. We were waiting for the storm predicted by the weather service, but also waiting for something else. The air felt heavy, charged, crackling with static electricity you could almost taste. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Eli broke, the strained silence, his voice low, rough like stones rubbing together. "You know it's real, don't you, Crow?" he asked, not looking at me, his gaze fixed intently on the hollow in the distance, his eyes narrowed as if trying to pierce the veil of fog and legend. I didn't answer right away. What could I say? Admitting it out loud felt like giving it more power, like opening a door that couldn't be closed. Maybe I had known, somewhere deep inside, since seeing that trail cam footage. Maybe even before that, prompted by my grandfather's hushed words by the firelight. But I wasn't ready to voice it, not fully. Instead, I took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady the tremor I felt starting deep inside me. "I think so, Eli," I finally admitted, the words feeling thick and reluctant on my tongue. "But it's not what I thought any legend could be. It feels older than the stories, more powerful, like it's been part of this mountain long before the first human footprint ever marked this soil." Eli nodded slowly, thoughtfully, his knuckles white where he gripped the worn leather of the steering wheel. "Yeah," he breathed out, a plume of vapor in the cold air. "My grandfather, old Moses, he told me stories when I was just a boy. Always warned me specifically about places like that hollow. Said they weren't just spots for camping or hunting deer. They were thresholds, places where things went in, but didn't always come out. Places where the ground remembered old wounds, old hungers. But you know how it is. People hear stories, they think superstition, easier to live that way." He sighed, a heavy sound. I dragged my gaze back towards the hollow, towards the jagged ridgeline barely visible through the swirling mist, and for the first time looking at it with this dawning, dreadful understanding. The trees covering its slopes didn't look innocent or majestic. They looked like teeth, like grasping claws. They looked hungry. A shiver traced its way down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold air. "We have to find it, Eli," I said, my voice sounding a little stronger, a little more resolute than I actually felt. "Or confront it somehow. Whatever it is, if it's really out there escalating like this, it's not just going to fade away. It's not going to wait for us to retire or transfer out. We need to face this. We need to finish this." Eli let out a low, rough chuckle, but there was absolutely no humor in it. It was the hollow laugh of a man suddenly confronted with the terrible knowledge that the childhood monsters might be real, and they might be hunting him. "Finish it?" he echoed, shaking his head slightly. "Crow, finishing something like this, it ain't like tracking a lost hiker or putting down a rabid fox. This is different." He paused, drumming his fingers on the dashboard. "I know some people," he said after a moment, his tone shifting, becoming more practical, more focused. "A few old friends back home, folks who know more about these woods, the real woods beneath the park maps, than anyone left alive. People who still listen to the old ways, who might have some piece of knowledge, some ritual, some protection we don't have in our manuals. I'll reach out, discreetly." He turned to look at me then, his eyes serious, filled with a weariness that seemed ancient. "But Crow," he added, his voice dropping again, I need you to know. I've seen things over the years. Out here, alone on patrol in remote corners. Heard things. Sounds that don't belong. Shadows that move too fast. Feelings, like being watched by something ancient and cold. I never spoke of them. Wrote them off as tricks of the light, fatigue, imagination. But now... He trailed off, looking back towards the brooding hollow. I don't know how to explain it, partner. But we're not alone out here anymore. Maybe we never were. And I got a bad feeling that we might not make it out of this particular patch of woods. My heart skipped a beat, then started hammering against my ribs. He was voicing the fear I hadn't dared put into words myself. We were out of our depth, way out. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with park regulations, Kevlar vests, and standard-issue firearms. This was something primal, something ancient and elemental, and it didn't give a damn about our training, our badges, or our intentions. It had no mercy, only hunger. And Eli's words confirmed my deepest fear. It was getting closer. It knew we were looking. It knew we were afraid. And it was coming. The rain came hard that night, just as the forecast predicted, but with a ferocity that felt personal, malevolent. It hammered down on the forest canopy, drumming relentlessly on the roof of my small ranger cabin, hitting the windows like flung gravel. It wasn't a cleansing rain. It felt like an assault, turning trails to slick mud, washing the familiar, comforting sense of pine and damp earth into something heavier, cloying. The storm set the entire woods on edge. Every sudden, violent gust of wind, shrieking through the high passes, didn't sound like wind. It sounded like whispers, distorted. Voices carried on the gale. Every fleeting break in the heavy slate-grey clouds, revealing a patch of bruised, churning sky, didn't offer hope. It felt like a tearing, like something immense and terrible was about to break free from the tormented heavens or claw its way up from the rain-soaked earth. Eli and I stood side by side under the narrow porch overhang of my cabin, shoulders hunched against the driving spray, watching the horizon where horned Devil's Hollow waited, its dark silhouette barely discernible. Beneath the thick curtain of rain, the air was electric, the tension palpable between us thicker than the downpour itself. "I don't know how much longer we have," I said, my voice tight, barely cutting through the roar of the rain and wind. "If it intends to make a move a night like this, under the cover of the storm, it feels like the time. I can feel it." The watching sensation had intensified, no longer a vague unease but a certainty, a pressure against the back of my neck. Eli didn't respond right away. He wasn't looking at the hollow anymore. His gaze was scanning the dense tree line closer to the cabin, his eyes moving methodically, professionally, despite the near-zero visibility. His hand rested casually, yet purposefully, on the grip of the heavy-caliber rifle slung over his shoulder. There was something in his posture, a coiled readiness, a grim acceptance that made my own heart race a little faster. He wasn't just prepared for trouble. He was expecting it, waiting for it. And then I heard it. Faint at first, almost lost, in the cacophony of the storm. A sound easily mistaken for the wind tearing through a narrow gap in the rocks, or the tortured groan of a tree limb about to break. But as it swelled, rising in pitch and volume, cutting through the rain's roar, I knew. My blood ran cold, freezing in my veins despite the humid chill of the storm. It was a high-pitched, piercing shriek. Unnatural. Wrong. A sound scraped raw from a throat not meant for this world. A scream of something vast and tormented, echoing not just through the air but seemingly up from the very bedrock, resonating deep within horned Devil's Hollow. "Eli!" I grabbed his arm, yanking him instinctively back towards the cabin door, then changing my mind. "Truck, get to the truck now!" I barked the order, my voice rough with sudden adrenaline. He didn't argue, didn't hesitate. Years of ranger training kicked in, overriding the shock. We scrambled off the porch, splashing through ankle-deep puddles that had already formed in the muddy yard, the rain plastering our hair and clothes to our skin instantly. We wrenched open the doors of my parked truck, throwing ourselves inside. The rain pelted the windshield, blurring the world outside into streaks of green and grey. I slammed the gear shift into reverse, jammed my foot down on the accelerator. The engine roared to life, a welcome sound in the chaos. The wheels spun, kicking up plumes of mud and water, tires struggling desperately to find purchase on the slick, saturated earth beneath us. The hollow source of that terrifying shriek felt impossibly close now, its unseen presence pressing in on us, closer than I ever wanted to believe it could be. What in the goddamn hell was that? Eli finally gasped, his voice tight with shock and disbelief, wiping rain from his face as he fumbled to secure his rifle across his lap. "I don't know," I gritted out, wrenching the wheel, swinging the truck around to face the narrow dirt track that led away from the cabin, away from the hollow. "But we need to move, fast. That thing, whatever it is, it's been watching, testing. This feels different, bolder, maybe the storm, maybe it gave it cover or power." My thoughts were racing, fragmented. We sped away from the cabin, plunging deeper into the storm-lashed forest, the road twisting and turning beneath us like a tormented snake. The once familiar logging track had transformed into a treacherous obstacle course of deep, churning puddles, slick moss-covered stones, and fallen branches ripped down by the wind. Every few seconds, the sweeping beams of the headlights would catch fleeting glimpses of movement at the edge of the woods, flickers of motion, dark shapes darting between the trees, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Were they just branches? Tossed by the wind, distorted shadows thrown by the lashing rain, or was it something else? There were things out there with us in the storm, watching us flee. I could feel it now, undeniably. The air inside the truck cab had turned thick, heavy, oppressive, charged with the same static dread that had clung to the mountainside earlier, as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Eli shifted uneasily, in his seat, his knuckles white on the rifle stock, his breathing shallow. I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Crow," he said, his voice low, strained. "Look, I've hunted bear, tracked catamount, faced down poachers with guns. This ain't just some spooked animal out there. This isn't natural." I nodded, grimly, tightening my grip on the vibrating steering wheel, my eyes glued to the treacherous path ahead, illuminated only in brief, rain-streaked flashes. "I know, Eli, I know. The stories. My grandfather's warnings about the horned devil. I think it's real. And we're not just in the park anymore. We're in its territory now." Just as the words left my mouth, the truck hit a deep, hidden rut concealed by muddy water. The impact jolted us violently, sending us both lurching forward against our seatbelts. The engine sputtered, coughed, threatened to die for one terrifying moment before catching again, sputtering unevenly. We were on a narrower, older track now, barely more than 2 muddy ruts cutting through the dense forest. The trees pressed in on either side, their heavy, rain-laden branches like grasping claws, blocking out what little ambient light remained, creating a suffocating tunnel of darkness. And then I saw it, or part of it. Just a flash, a peripheral flicker caught in the furthest reach of the headlights as we rounded a sharp bend. Dark, impossibly long skeletal limbs, jointed at unnatural angles, stretched out from behind the thick, gnarled trunk of an ancient oak tree standing sentinel beside the path, the briefest of outlines, silhouetted against the turbulent dark beyond. But it was enough. More than enough. It was as if the creature's mere proximity warped reality, twisting the air around it, making the familiar shapes of the trees seem menacing, distorted, alien, and then like smoke dissipating in the wind, Like a phantom made of shadow and rain, it was gone. Vanished back into the impenetrable darkness between the trees. I slammed on the brakes instinctively, the truck fishtailing wildly on the slick mud, finally skidding to a jarring halt sideways across the narrow track. We sat there, frozen, silence descending inside the cab, broken only by the frantic drumming of the rain on the roof and the ragged sound of our own harsh breathing. Our heartbeats thundered in our chests, loud in the sudden quiet. We stared, out through the rain-lashed windshield, into the inky blackness ahead, where the thing had been, where it presumably still lurked. The world around us was utterly still for a moment, caught in the eye of some internal storm, but not for long. A heavy thud echoed through the trees, distinct even over the rain. Not the crack of a falling branch. This was heavier, more deliberate. It was followed by another, and another. The ground beneath the truck vibrated slightly with each impact. Footsteps. Heavy, impossibly heavy footsteps. Whatever was coming, it was big, and it was moving deliberately towards us. My breath caught tight in my throat, refusing to release. The sound drew closer, steadier, until I could make out the terrible, lumbering rhythm of its gait. Thud. Drag, thud, drag, each step shaking the very earth. And then I saw it, emerging slowly, deliberately, from the curtain of rain and darkness, stepping into the ragged edge of the headlight beams. This time there was no mistaking it, no fleeting glimpse. It stood tall. Impossibly tall, its hunched posture making it seem even more menacing. Its head, crowned with what looked disturbingly like a rack of broken, jagged antlers or horns, scraped the lower branches of the towering pines. Its limbs were long and spindly, moving with that same backward-jointed gait I'd seen on the trail, giving it a terrifyingly arachnidon quality. Its hide or skin was dark, slick with rain, seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it. And its eyes, those eyes, they glowed like twin coals fanned in a furnace, burning with malevolent intelligence and ancient hunger. It was there, right there, directly in front of us, just beyond the main wash of the headlights, close enough for us to see the rain plastering its strange hide, close enough to feel the waves of cold dread radiating from it. I could barely breathe, couldn't tear my gaze away as its burning eyes locked onto mine through the windshield. The horned devil, Uktina's cousin, the thing my grandfather warned me about with fear in his own eyes. This wasn't myth. This wasn't folklore spun from whiskey and shadows. It was real, horribly, undeniably real, and it was coming for us. I don't know how long we sat there, frozen in the truck's cab, paralyzed by a primal terror that bypassed all reason, all training. Time seemed to stretch, warp, become meaningless. My mind was racing, screaming commands, drive, shoot, do something. But my body refused to obey, locked in place by the sheer enormity of what stood before us. The thing in front of the truck didn't just look wrong, it felt wrong. A profound violation of the natural order. Like it was a cancerous growth on the soul of the forest, something that wasn't supposed to be. Its eyes, those burning, unholy embers, never left mine. It was more than just looking. It felt like it was peeling back the layers, seeing into my soul, stripping away the carefully constructed walls of professionalism, duty, courage. All the things I'd spent my life trying to build, trying to protect, they just melted away in the heat of that abyssal gaze. Fear, anger, the instinct for survival itself. None of it mattered. What remained was pure, undiluted ancient terror, the kind that steals your breath and stops your heart. Then the thing took a slow, deliberate step forward. Its cloven hoof, impossibly, my grandfather had been right, struck a stone on the path, sending up a shower of small sparks that hissed in the rain. That sound, that small jarring detail, snapped the paralysis. My foot slammed down on the accelerator before my conscious mind even registered the decision. Raw survival instinct took over. The truck engine roared, protesting the sudden demand. Tires spun uselessly in the thick mud for a heart-stopping second, then miraculously found some measure of traction. The truck lurched forward, careening wildly down the narrow, winding path. Eli shouted something beside me, a wordless cry of alarm or encouragement, but I couldn't hear him clearly over the frantic pounding of my own heartbeat in my ears and the renewed roar of the storm outside. Behind us, I didn't need to look to. No, I could hear it. The heavy, bone-jarring thud, drag, thud, drag of the creature following us. It was moving with an unnatural, terrifying speed, despite its apparent bulk and ungainly gait. Closing the distance, the forest flashed past the windows in a terrifying blur of green and black. Branches whipped against the sides of the truck, scraping paint, one thick limb cracking loudly against the passenger side window, startling Eli. "Got her." "Lose it, Crow, it's too damn fast," Eli screamed, his voice barely audible above the engine's whine and the storm's fury. He was fumbling with the rifle in his lap, trying to brace it against the dashboard, maybe hoping for a shot out the back window, a desperate, impossible idea. But I couldn't take my hands off the wheel, couldn't spare a fraction of a second's attention. Not now, not when that thing felt like it was breathing down our necks. I swerved hard to the right, tires losing grip again, the back end sliding dangerously close to the trees. I narrowly avoided a large fallen hemlock, blocking half the path, the truck screeching and groaning with the strain as the tires fought for purchase on the slick surface. Through the rain-streaked windshield I saw it, a faint, familiar silhouette against the darker sky, the old ranger station, abandoned years ago, but still standing, located in a small clearing just off this old access road. Just a few more yards, maybe 50. I could just make out the outline of the sturdy log building through the driving rain. It was derelict, probably half rotten inside, but I knew it had one thing we desperately needed right now: security, thick walls, and maybe, just maybe, if luck was with us, the old emergency cache hadn't been fully cleared out. Weapons. The truck hit a sharp incline leading up to the station's clearing, bounced hard, nearly bottoming out. I slammed on the brakes again, knowing we couldn't outrun it on this terrain, not for long. We were out of time. The thing was too close now. I could almost feel its presence behind us, a palpable wave of cold and malice. Its breathing, if you could call it that, sounded like wind whistling through jagged rocks, a low guttural growl vibrating in the air, felt more than heard through the truck's frame. I yanked the emergency brake hard. The truck skidded sideways, in the mud, spinning almost a full 180 degrees before shuddering to a final stop, just yards from the porch of the old station. The headlights now pointed back down the track we'd just come up, cutting a swathe through the rain, illuminating nothing but the churning mud and the menacing wall of trees. But we both knew it was out there, close. "Get out, Eli, get out!" I shouted, already fumbling with my own door handle, drawing my service sidearm from its holster, the familiar weight a small, cold comfort. "We need to make it inside. Now! Move!" Eli hesitated for only a split second, his eyes darting instinctively to the rearview mirror, reflecting the stark fear that must have been mirrored in my own face. Then he bolted. He shoved his door open and scrambled out into the deluge, rifle clutched tight. The rain was relentless, soaking us to the bone in seconds as we sprinted the short distance across the muddy clearing towards the dark shape of the ranger station. Behind us, the heavy footsteps resumed. Thud. Drag. Louder. Now, faster. Closer. Terrifyingly close. It was closing the distance with impossible speed. I reached the warped wooden door of the station, grabbed the old iron handle and twisted. Locked, or rusted shut. Damn it! I cursed under my breath, fumbling frantically with the keychain I'd ripped from the truck's ignition. My fingers felt numb, clumsy with cold and adrenaline. Which key? The master key set for older park structures. Yes. The brass key slid into the old lock. Stiffly, grudgingly, it turned. The mechanism inside groaned in protest. With a final shove of my shoulder, the heavy door creaked open inward, revealing a dark, musty interior. Eli and I practically fell inside, stumbling over the threshold. I slammed the heavy plank door shut behind us, fumbling in the dark to find the heavy wooden bar I knew should be there, dropping it into the crude iron brackets on the frame. Secured. For now. We were inside. Out of the rain at least, but the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The air inside the station was thick with the smell of dust, decay, rodent droppings, and something else. A faint metallic tang, like old blood. Moonlight filtered through the storm clouds, and the grimy window panes offered only the barest illumination, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe in the corners of the room. I didn't have time to look around to get my bearings. We needed weapons, more than just my handgun and Eli's rifle. And we needed them fast. "The back room," I gasped, heading towards the rear of the single large room that constituted the main station area. Old supply cache, emergency gear, might be something left. Eli was right behind me, his breathing ragged, his face pale and grim in the dim, spectral light filtering through the storm-swept windows. We found the door to the small back storeroom, thankfully unlocked. Inside, amidst cobwebs and dust-covered shelves holding forgotten files and rusty equipment, was the emergency locker, a heavy-duty steel footlocker bolted to the floor. I knew the combination, an old Park Service standard they rarely changed. My trembling fingers worked the dial. Click, click, clack. The tumblers fell into place. I lifted the heavy lid. Relief washed over me, cold and sharp. It hadn't been completely emptied. A pump-action shotgun still wrapped in oilcloth, several boxes of shells, buckshot and slugs, a flare gun with a few cartridges, a heavy-duty first aid kit, and, blessedly, another rifle, an older model bolt-action, also with a couple of boxes of ammunition. I think we might be safe in here for a bit," Eli panted, reaching past me, gratefully taking the shotgun, checking the action with practiced hands. The solid, reassuring sound of him chambering around echoed in the small, musty room. Solid walls, barred door. But what the hell is that thing out there, Crow? What are we up against? I grabbed the bolt-action rifle, my hand steadier now that I held something more substantial than my pistol. I quickly loaded it, the familiar metallic click of cartridges sliding into the magazine, a small anchor in the swirling chaos of fear and adrenaline. How could I explain it, the horned devil? It wasn't just an animal driven by hunger or territory. It wasn't even just a killer loose in the woods. It felt like something much darker, something intrinsically linked to the land itself, something ancient and malevolent given physical form. And somehow, inexplicably, it had decided we were next on its list. That the warnings weren't just general, they were specific. To us. "It doesn't matter what it is right now, Eli," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, forcing a confidence I didn't truly feel. "All that matters is stopping it. We need to kill it, now, before it tears that door down." We both knew, looking at the heavy but ultimately wooden construction of the old station, looking at each other's pale faces in the gloom, that the odds were slim. That creature, whatever its origins, whatever its purpose, wasn't going to be easily deterred. It had hunted us, stalked us for days, maybe weeks, maybe longer, if Jim Wee's disappearance was connected. It had driven us here. It was closing, in for the kill. And then from outside we heard it. Not the heavy footsteps this time, a different sound. The sharp, tearing scrape of massive claws dragging across the wood of the main station door. A low, guttural, menacing growl vibrated through the floorboards, rattling the loose panes in the window frames. It was right outside, testing the defenses. Too close. Far too close. Then it happened. Faster than I could have believed possible. The heavy wooden door didn't just splinter or break. It exploded inward. Wood shards, dust, and splinters flew across the room like shrapnel. Framed for a terrifying instant in the ruined doorway, silhouetted against the raging storm outside, stood the horned devil. Its eyes glowed like hellfire, fixing on us instantly in the dim interior. It lowered its horned head and lunged through the opening, letting out a deafening roar that was part animal rage, part something far worse, something that scraped against the soul. The moment it crossed the threshold, filling the cramped space with its unnatural bulk and terrifying presence, I fired the rifle. The shot cracked like thunder inside the small room, the recoil jarring my shoulder. The heavy caliber bullet ripped into its shoulder, staggering it momentarily. A dark ichorous fluid, not quite blood, splattered onto the floorboards. It roared again, a sound of pain and fury this time, but it barely seemed to flinch otherwise. It was too fast, too strong, too unnatural. Eli fired the shotgun, the blast deafening, the buckshot tearing into the creature's leg, making it stumble. But it kept coming, lunging towards Eli, closer to the shotgun. And then something even more terrifying occurred, something completely unexpected, something that chilled me far deeper than the creature's physical threat. As the horned devil roared, momentarily distracted by the pain of its wounds, a thick, cloying darkness began to ooze from the shadowed corners of the room. Not just shadows deepening, but something tangible, viscous, like living ink pouring from beneath the floorboards, seeping from cracks in the old log walls. It wasn't a solid shape, more like coalescing shadow, a formless entity of pure blackness, and it pulsed with an unnatural cold, a bone-deep chill far worse, far more penetrating than the horned devil's palpable heat and fury. The faint whispers I'd sometimes heard in the woods, the voices that sounded like my dead brother, now swelled into a distinct, multi-voiced chorus, swirling around us like an invisible psychic vortex, gibbering fragments of forgotten languages, words of despair and madness. The horned devil itself seemed startled, confused even, by this new manifestation. It paused its relentless advance towards Eli, its burning eyes flicking nervously, almost fearfully, towards the rapidly spreading darkness. This shadow, it wasn't allied with the devil. It was something else entirely. Something opportunistic, something worse. The shadow creature, coalescing rapidly into a vaguely man-shaped silhouette of roiling darkness, surged forward with terrifying speed. But not at me, not at the wounded horned devil. It lunged directly at Eli. Before I could react, before I could even shout a warning, the living shadow enveloped him. It flowed over him like water, smothering him in an instant. Eli let out a single, strangled, horrifying scream, a sound of ultimate terror and soul-shredding agony that was abruptly, sickeningly cut off as the darkness consumed him completely. For a moment, the shadow shape seemed to pulse, expanding, slightly, and then just as quickly it contracted, withdrawing back into the cracks in the walls and floorboards, flowing away like receding tide water, taking Eli with it. He was gone. Not killed and left behind, vanished, utterly, completely gone, leaving only the echo of his final scream and an empty space where my friend and partner had stood a second before. Eli. The name ripped from my throat, a raw sound of disbelief, grief and primal terror. My heart felt like it had shattered into a million icy fragments. Blindly, instinctively, I raised the rifle and fired again, emptying the remaining rounds into the spots where the shadow had last been seen, into the cracks from which it had retreated. The bullets punched harmlessly through the floorboards, and walls, finding no purchase, hitting nothing tangible. The shadow was gone. Eli was gone. I was alone, facing the wounded, enraged but still terrifyingly present horned devil, and facing the horrifying, incomprehensible reality of what had just happened to Eli Stevens, her death far worse than tooth and claw. In that moment of raw despair and terror, as the horned devil shook its horned head, its burning eyes refocusing on me, preparing to finish the job, another figure appeared in the ruined doorway. Unnoticed, in the preceding chaos. A woman, or the shape of one. She seemed almost woven from the storm itself, draped in tattered robes that looked like they were made of tightly woven strips of bark, shadow, and clinging mist. Her face was obscured, veiled, by a swirling curtain of fog or vapor that clung to her even within the relative shelter of the station. But her eyes glowed with a strange, soft, otherworldly light, a cool luminescence like captured moonlight or distant stars, a stark contrast to the devil's burning gaze. She didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there calmly, watching the scene, her presence radiating an ancient, quiet power. The horned devil stopped its advance towards me instantly. Its low growl turned into a guttural, fearful hiss at the sight of her. The tangible darkness, the oppressive atmosphere the devil carried with it, seemed to thin slightly around her. Even the lingering psychic chill left by the shadow creature seemed to recoil from her presence, retreating further into the hidden places of the old station. The woman then turned her gaze towards me. Her faintly glowing eyes passed over the now empty rifle clutched uselessly in my shaking hands, then met mine directly. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, yet it carried an immense weight, the resonance of ages, like the whisper of wind through long-abandoned ancestral sites, like the collective memory of the mountains themselves given voice. It cut through the lingering roar of the storm outside. "You should not have come here," she said, her tone a strange mixture of sorrow and sternness, quiet yet filling the space. "To this place, at this time. But now you are entangled, caught in the turning of a wheel, far older than your park. Service far older than your people's recent memory. This creature you call the horned devil, and the shadow that follows. The one that took your friend. They are parts of an old, broken cycle." My breath hitched in my throat. My mind struggled to grasp the sudden shift, the appearance of this impossible figure, the implication of her words. Who was she? How did she know so much? Eli's terrible end was still a fresh, bleeding wound in my soul, but her presence, her calm power, had momentarily stayed the immediate threat. The horned devil remained poised near the doorway, wounded, wary, its hateful eyes flicking between me and the woman, clearly uncertain, perhaps even afraid of her. The station felt thick with conflicting energies, the sulphurous stench and heat radiating from the devil, the lingering, soul-deep chill of the shadow that had consumed Eli, and the strange, ancient calm emanating from this newcomer. I needed answers now more than I needed safety. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice hoarse, taking a hesitant step forward. The heavy rifle felt utterly useless against the kind of powers now swirling in this room. "You can stop this, can't you? You stopped it." I gestured towards the horned devil. Hope flickered faintly, desperately. "I know the stories. My grandfather spoke of, guardians. Spirits tied to the oldest places. You're one of them, aren't you? A spirit of the woods? An ancestor?" Her gaze, still veiled, seemed to soften just slightly, though the aura of deep time and shadow still clung to her like a second skin. "I am what remains," she whispered, the words seeming to drift on the air, almost as if she were speaking more to herself or to the listening mountains than directly to me. "A remnant of the guardians, a watcher, a protector of a sort. But there are forces at play now, currents stirred that run deeper, stronger than even the oldest protections. Things out of balance. This creature, she indicated the horned devil with a subtle gesture, the one your people named in fear, it is not merely a beast of flesh and bone and rage. It is a manifestation, a symptom of a deeper hunger, a wound in the land made manifest. It feeds upon the place itself, draws strength from fear, from pain, from the disruption of the natural cycles. The shadow, her voice dropped lower, colder. The shadow is something else, something that slipped through a crack opened by the chaos, a devourer of souls, awakened, emboldened by the horned devil's rampage, feeding on the despair. It creates. A fresh wave of dread washed over me, colder than the shadow's touch, but it was hunting us. Hunting me, I insisted, remembering the trail cam, the whispers, the feeling of being singled out. The woman inclined her veiled head, a gesture that might have been a nod. Her expression, glimpsed faintly through the mist, was grim. It has always been drawn to those tied most closely to the earth, she explained. To the bloodlines that carry the oldest memories, the deepest connections, those who belong to the land, whether they fully acknowledge it or not. It seeks to sever those connections, to consume that light. It feasts on fear, yes, but more than that, on the despair born of broken bonds, of lost heritage. But know this, Ranger Crow, her glowing eyes fixed on mine again, it cannot truly destroy that which is deeply rooted. Those who remember, consciously or not, the ancient bonds, those who truly belong to this land, like you, I recoiled instinctively, shaking my head. Me? No, you're wrong. I don't belong here any more than anyone else. I'm a ranger. That's my job. I have no connection to whatever ancient power you're talking about. My family, we live modern lives. She made a soft sound, almost a sigh, her smoky robes flowing like mist pooling around her feet. You are far more than just a ranger, Sequoia Crow, she said, using my given Cherokee name, a name few outside my family knew, sending another jolt through me. Your profession is but a single layer wrapped around a much older core. The blood of the Aniunwia, the principal people, runs deep and strong in your veins. Your ancestors walked these mountains, knew their secrets, sang their songs, respected their power long before any government drew lines on a map and called it a park. You are a keeper, whether you have chosen the role or not, a potential anchor in a gathering storm, a part of this land in a way outsiders can never be. Heart slammed against my ribs. The disparate pieces, my grandfather's stories, the creature's focus, Eli's knowledge, the intense feeling of connection and violation I felt in these woods, this woman's pronouncements, they were clicking together, forming a terrifying, unbelievable mosaic. But the picture it formed, and it didn't make sense. Not in the world I thought I knew, the horned devil. The ancient legends made flesh. It wasn't just a random monster. It was a force, tied to the land, drawn to something within me. And Eli was gone. Caught in the crossfire, perhaps, or taken because he stood beside me. Was his death, that horrific end, somehow because of me? Guilt, sharp and agonizing, twisted inside me, adding another layer to the fear and grief. Then how do I stop it? I choked out, desperation clawing at my throat, overriding the lingering skepticism. How do I end this? How do I avenge Eli? The woman didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. Instead, she reached into the folds of her shadowy robes, her movements fluid and ancient. Her hand, when it emerged, was pale, almost luminous, the fingers long and slender. You cannot simply kill the horned devil, not with bullets or fire, she stated plainly, her voice regaining some of its stern quality. Its roots run too deep. It is woven into the fabric of this place's pain. It must be rebound, sealed away. Its hold on this plane must be severed, and to do that, her glowing eyes met mine, filled with an unnerving gravity. You must call upon the power that resides within you, within your bloodline, the power of your ancestors, the ones who walked these lands before metal or maps, the ones who understood the balance. They are the key. She paused, her gaze softening again as she looked at the raw grief undoubtedly etched on my face. And know this, Sequoia Crow. Such an act demands a price, a significant one, paid by you and you alone. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Call upon my ancestors? How? I wasn't a shaman. I hadn't practiced the old ceremonies, barely knew the full meanings behind the fragments of lore I'd heard. I'd spent my life straddling two worlds, the pragmatic scientific world of park management and the half-remembered, often dismissed world of my heritage. I had never truly believed, not in this tangible, terrifying way, but staring at the wounded, hissing, horned devil still lurking by the door, thinking of Eli's horrifying disappearance into the shadow, feeling the ancient power radiating from the woman before me. Denial was no longer an option. The reality of the situation, however impossible, was closing in. This wasn't a fight I could win with standard procedures or weaponry. Tell me, I said, my voice rough but resolute, desperation giving way to a grim determination. Tell me what I need to do. The woman turned her veiled head slightly, glancing towards the doorway where the horned devil still waited, its earlier aggression now tempered by a visible wariness, perhaps even fear, directed solely at her. Outside, the storm still raged, wind howling, rain lashing against the ruined doorway. But inside the dilapidated station, a strange pocket of silence had fallen. I could hear nothing but the frantic thudding of my own heart against my ribs and the soft, almost inaudible whisper of the wind finding its way through cracks in the log walls. "Take this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper now, but resonant with authority. She drew a small bundle from the shadowy folds of her robe. It was an old leather pouch, darkened with age, worn smooth by countless hands, tied shut with a rawhide thong. She pressed it into my hand. It felt surprisingly heavy, dense, radiating a faint warmth despite the chill in the room. Inside, beneath the soft leather, I could feel small, distinct shapes wrapped carefully in what felt like dried leaves, hard, irregular pieces of root, perhaps some smooth stones, the soft brush of feathers, and something else. Something small and sharp-edged that seemed to pulse with a faint internal glimmer, like captured starlight, or the dust of forgotten stars. Maybe a shard of obsidian, or quartz from a sacred site. "These are fragments of the old power," she explained, "elements of binding, earth, air, spirit. This will help anchor the creature, pull it back to the slumbering dark. You must take this, bundle and place it upon the earth at the heart of the hollow, the place where you sensed its presence most strongly, the place where it first began to stir and exert its influence." Her instructions were clear, precise. But the binding requires more than just these items. It requires a connection, a sacrifice, a piece of you. Your blood, freely given, must soak the earth alongside the binding pouch. Only then will the connection be made strong enough. "When you do this, speak the old words." And here she murmured a short sequence of Cherokee words, phrases I vaguely recognized from ceremonial contexts. Words of connection, banishment, and respect for the land, their cadence settling deep within my bones. "It will be drawn back, pulled down into the deep places from which it crawled. It will be bound." She paused, her glowing eyes searching mine intensely. "But be warned, Sequoia Crow. Binding such a power, forcibly altering such a fundamental balance, may have unforeseen consequences. The scales rarely settle perfectly." I nodded numbly, clutching the leather pouch tightly in my hand. It felt charged, almost alive, vibrating with latent energy. The weight felt immense, not just physical, but the weight of ages, of responsibility, of the terrible task ahead. I didn't question her further. Didn't ask her name or how she knew mine or what would happen after. There wasn't time. Eli's memory, the chilling presence of the shadow, the wounded beast still lurking, they urged me forward. With one last look at the enigmatic woman, a silent acknowledgement passing between us, I turned. I ignored the horned devil still blocking the main entrance, hoping its fear of the woman would hold it. I ran towards the back door of the storeroom, the one leading out the rear of the station, further into the woods but away from the immediate confrontation. I kicked it open and plunged back out into the raging storm, leaving the grief for Eli temporarily compartmentalized, leaving the unsettling presence of the guardian and the menacing bulk of the horned devil behind me. I had a task to do, a binding to perform, for Eli, for these mountains, for whatever piece of ancestral duty had just been thrust upon me. I had to finish this part of the nightmare. The storm hadn't lessened its fury. If anything, the wind howled louder, tearing at my clothes, driving the rain horizontally into my face, stinging my eyes. The ground beneath my worn ranger boots was a treacherous soup of mud and slick leaves, each step a battle to stay upright, to keep moving forward. My destination was clear in my mind, the heart of Horned Devil's Hollow, the place where I'd seen the figure on the camera, the place where Josie and I had found the spiral of bones, the epicenter of the wrongness that had infected these woods. It lay deeper into the park, maybe a mile or so through this tempestuous darkness from the old station. The trees here, as I stumbled deeper into the hollow's influence, seemed even more twisted, more menacing than elsewhere, ancient, gnarled, oaks and hemlocks, their branches clawing at the turbulent sky like skeletal hands, their roots exposed by the runoff, looking like thick, dark veins throbbing in the sodden earth. They pulsed with the same dark, oppressive energy that had filled the station, the energy that had permeated the park for months now, growing stronger. I could feel it in my bones, that same suffocating presence I had felt when I first saw the trail cam footage, the presence that had intensified with each horrifying discovery. It knew I was coming. It was waiting for me. Here in its heartland, the center of the hollow, when I finally reached it, slipping and sliding down a final steep embankment into a bowl-shaped depression, was an eerie, desolate sight. Even through the driving rain and gloom, the wrongness was palpable. The trees here didn't just grow, they writhed. Their trunks were contorted into unnatural shapes, branches intertwined like arthritic fingers, reaching not towards the sky but seemingly inwards, towards the center of the depression, as if guarding or containing something. The air was thick, heavy, almost unbreathable, carrying the stench of decay and something else, something metallic and faintly sulphurous. A palpable sense of ancient dread hung in the air like a physical weight. This was the place, the wound, the source. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the roar of the storm. I felt the presence of the horned devil drawing closer, converging on this place, drawn perhaps by the binding pouch I carried, or perhaps simply sensing the focus of my intent. It hadn't remained at the station. It was coming. I didn't know if I was ready for what I was about to do, if I truly possessed the strength, the connection the woman spoke of. But I had no choice. Eli's face flashed in my mind, his final scream echoing in the wind. Taking a deep, ragged breath, I reached into my coat, pulling out the worn leather pouch the woman had given me. My fingers closed around the bundle within, the roots, the feathers, the sharp-edged, faintly glowing shard. Kneeling in the mud and swirling leaves at the absolute center of the hollow, the place where the oppressive feeling was strongest, I clutched the bundle tight. Now came the price. Remembering. The woman's solemn words, "Your blood must soak the earth with it." There was no hesitation now, only grim resolve. I pulled my sturdy hunting knife from the sheath on my belt. The blade gleamed dully in the faint, stormy light. Taking another steadying breath, focusing my intent, channeling the memory of my ancestors, the feel of this land before the sickness, I drew the sharp blade swiftly and firmly across the palm of my left hand. Pain flared, sharp and clean. Blood welled up instantly, dark crimson against my skin, warm and shockingly vital in the cold rain. Ignoring the throb, I pressed the bundled charms firmly down into the wet, grasping earth of the hollow. Simultaneously, I opened my bleeding hand above it, letting my lifeblood drip down, soaking the leather pouch, the earth around it, mingling with the rain and mud. And as the blood flowed, I began to murmur the words the woman had taught me, the old Cherokee words of binding, of respect, of returning, of healing the wounded land. Words whose exact linguistic translation might have been fragmented in my modern mind, but whose inherent power, whose deep resonance, I felt vibrating within me, echoing up from the very ground beneath my knees. A connection sparked, ancient and profound. As the last word left my lips, mingling with the blood and the storm, the ground beneath me began to tremble. Not just a slight vibration, but a violent shaking. The earth groaned, a deep tectonic rumble that seemed to come from the very bowels of the mountain. The trees around the hollow writhed, their branches whipping wildly, not just from the wind, but from the disturbance emanating from below. And then it emerged from the shadows at the edge of the depression, drawn inexorably towards the binding point. The horned devil. It looked different now, larger, somehow more substantial, yet also more desperate. Its twisted, vestigial wings, mere tatters before, seemed more unfurled, flapping uselessly as it stumbled forward. Its dark hide glistened with a sickly, unnatural sheen in the dim, turbulent light. Its eyes, those black, soulless pits of burning coal, locked onto me, filled not just with fury now, but with something else, a dawning, panicked understanding. "Your soul," it rasped, its voice like the grating of tombstones, like dry leaves, skittering across asphalt. "I come for your soul, anchor." It lurched towards me, claws outstretched. But I stood my ground, kneeling beside the blood-soaked charm, anchoring myself to the ritual, to the land. I channeled my fear, my grief, for Eli, my anger at this violation, into the binding. The ground shook more violently now, fissures beginning to crack open in the mud around the central point where I knelt, releasing plumes of foul-smelling steam. The creature screamed, a high-pitched, unearthly sound of pure agony and terror. This time, its massive, twisted form convulsing as if struck by lightning. The shadows that clung to it, the palpable aura of wrongness it radiated, began to dissipate, bleeding away into the rain-soaked air, fraying at the edges, peeling away, like old parchment. It felt as though the very essence of the horned devil, its connection to this plane, was being forcefully severed, pulled away by the power humming in the earth beneath me, fueled by my blood and the ancient words. The devil roared one last time, a sound of utter desolation and fury, its body writhing like a thing consumed by invisible fire. And for the first time clearly visible in those burning eyes, I saw it. Terror, pure abject terror. With a final convulsive cry, the creature made one last desperate lunge towards me, towards the source of its undoing, but it was too late. The earth directly beneath it gave way completely. A great ragged rift opened in the hollow's floor, a yawning chasm leading down into impenetrable darkness. The very ground seemed to heave and swallow it whole. The devil's final scream echoed, diminishing as it was pulled down, inexorably, into the dark, hungry depths, its thrashing limbs and flapping wings vanishing into the abyss as the shadows were torn from its dissipating form. In an instant it was gone, consumed by the hollow, bound, sealed away. The earth shuddered one last time, then fell still. The terrible shaking ceased. The wind, though still blowing, seemed to lose its furious edge, its mournful howl softening. The relentless drumming of the rain eased slightly, becoming less of an assault. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as though the mountain itself had just exhaled a long, tortured breath held for centuries. I slowly, shakily got to my feet, panting, every muscle trembling from adrenaline and exertion. I stared numbly at the spot where the horned devil had vanished, at the torn earth beginning to settle, the chasm already seeming less distinct, as if the land itself was healing the wound. My cut hand throbbed painfully, a stark physical reminder of the price paid, the sacrifice made. The hollow was still. The oppressive presence was lifted. The park felt quiet once more. I looked. Around at the trees, the ancient, gnarled sentinels of this place. They still looked old, twisted by time and weather, but the menacing quality, the hungry feeling, had receded. The palpable darkness seemed to have lifted, bled away with the creature's demise. The land felt free, returned to itself. But then, even as relief started to tentatively bloom within me, another kind of coldness began to seep into my bones. This silence, it was different from the oppressive hush before, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet of a forest returning to normal. It felt heavier now, expectant, charged with a different kind of tension. The feeling of being watched hadn't entirely vanished with the horned devil. If anything, it felt stronger, sharper, more focused. But it wasn't the hot, malevolent pressure of the devil. This was colder, more insidious. And then I heard it. A whisper. Close. So close, it felt like it was right behind my ear. Not the voice of the trees, not the wind, not the lingering echo of the storm. It was a dry, sibilant, hungry whisper. The sound, I realized with a jolt of fresh terror, of the shadow creature, the soul eater, the thing that had taken Eli. Without the horned devil's chaotic presence to perhaps keep it occupied or somehow tethered, it felt unleashed, freed, focused. I spun around, knife still in hand, heart leaping back into my throat. But nothing, was there? Only the dense woods, the dripping trees, the settling mist. Yet the shadows between the trees seemed deeper now, thicker, less like absences of light and more like substance. Waiting. I felt a new kind of binding settle upon me, heavy and cold, not just the reluctant acceptance of my ancestral connection to this land, invoked by blood and ritual, but a binding to the darkness that remained, the darkness that had perhaps been disturbed, angered, or even partially unleashed by the violent removal of the horned devil. The mysterious woman, the guardian, she was gone, vanished as silently as she had appeared, but I felt her presence lingering somehow, a cold, dispassionate observation, no longer actively helpful, merely watching the consequences unfold. Her final words echoed with chilling clarity in my mind. Binding such a power may alter the balance. I had won the battle against the horned devil. I had faced the legend, paid the price, and sealed the beast away. But standing there alone in the now chillingly quiet heart of Horned Devil's Hollow, the scar on my hand pulsing, the memory of Eli's scream echoing, and the dry whisper of the shadow seeming to curl around me from the deeper darkness between the trees, I understood with horrifying certainty. The immediate threat was gone, but the true fight, the deeper struggle against the darkness that lingered, the darkness that had consumed my friend, might have only just begun. I had saved the park, perhaps, But in doing so, I had become irrevocably part of Horned Devil's Hollow myself. A new guardian, maybe, like the woman had implied, but also a target, bound by blood, marked by sacrifice, and tethered to the ancient cycles of this place, facing a waiting, hungry shadow. The woods might be quieter now. But they were not peaceful, not for me, not anymore.